when she first got married.
Oh, really?
And he lived across the street. Yeah, he used to put out a bullet.
I've seen you there.
Yeah. He left the shed, didn't he?
Yeah, he moved to Israel. But he started back in 4. He's got 6 months.
What did he do with the shoe, the house?
No, it's still there. It's a new rub is there, and nice. They fixed it up. Looks nice.
Nice.
Learning sponsors as we gather for a year of learning, friends of Malaskotsky, Moshe Zelig, Ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman, and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bar Pinchas, friends of her Jeremiah Tzvi Ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmur Ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Kohen, those who were inspired by our Rebbets in Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka Bat Mishlomi Yisachar, Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents, Mushka Sprinza Bat Yosef Chaim Bechava, Hanan Ben Moshe, Eliezer Vechana, Pesha Bat Shmuel, Yitzchak Halevi Vitzikora, Yisr Ben Yoel Moshe Cohen Vechana, Rexford Friends of Gladys Sherman, Gutta Bat Meir, Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi Ben Chaim, Marsha Bronner in memory of her husband, Rav Yerachmiel Ben Shmuel, a month of learning by Reuven and Susan Podolsky, in memory of his father, Tzvi Ben Pinchas, Charles Gelfenstein in memory of his mother, Dacia Gittel Bat Meir Halevi. Today is the 6th of the month, a day of learning by Gail and Milton Meller, in memory of her late husband, Simcha Gedalia Ben Meir. And Shamus having Aliyah, Crank Rafia Velti Yeshir Shem Latzliah, and Chol Ben Israel Good Gebenshtia.
Amen. Strong.
Zoom, and they recorded as well. And they're on the website of the show?
All right, Rabbi. So we are in the middle. We have an analysis of the Mishnah. So we have an argument. We know Mava is a funny word. So we had two opinions. We had Rav's opinion that Mava, the third on the list, is talking about damage done by a man, by a human. And according to Shmuel, we said it has to do with it's damage done by Shane, by an animal eating. Today we are going to have a very surprising discussion, and I'll explain what that is. Because we in any given point, the Gemara is always discussing one of four things. I have in any given time, I have a certain case, a set of circumstances. I have a law, okay, that applies to that case. I have what we call a factor, which is the driving force that finds what essence in the case brings about a law, and we can have a source if we want to prove something. So the Gemara at any time, or the Mishnah at any time, is always discussing one of those things. We're always looking for a case, a source, a factor, or a law. Here,
like the principle behind it.
the factor would be like the driving force, like the cause. In other words, here, I'll give you an example. Let's say you find a dollar bill in the street. So the case is you found a dollar bill in the street. Okay, the law is you're allowed to keep that. You're allowed to keep that in the public domain. You're allowed to keep that. What is the factor? The factor is it identifies a component of the case that causes the law. So I say to you that since a dollar bill is something with no identifying mark, we consider the dollar bill ownerless, and therefore, since it's ownerless, the person who finds it can keep it. Now, in this case, we don't have to bring a source, okay, but we could bring a source if we needed to. So at any time in a Torah discussion, we're always discussing one of those four things. We're looking for a case. We're looking for a law. Sometimes we know the law. We don't know what it's talking about, what the case is talking about. Sometimes we know the case in the law. We don't know what the factor is. We don't know what the cause, what the reasoning of the law is. So here we are. I told you the Yom Baba Kama is really a classic lesson in how to teach and how to learn. Why? Because the Gemara combines analysis and teaching of fact at the same time. So we're getting all the information about how damages work and how we're obligating damages by virtue of analyzing the Mishnah. Now, so we said that according to Shmuel, we proposed at this point, at the end of yesterday, that shor in the Mishnah, the first thing is talking about Keren, talking about damage done by goring, and that mava is damage done by Shane, by the animal eating. Now, in order to justify that, we're as a support for what we're saying, we want to read the continuation of Mishnah. Since the Mishnah compares and contrasts, well, Shor is not as lenient as Maveh, and Maveh is not as lenient as Shor, and the two of them are not as lenient as the fire, etc. So we want to make it work. If we made a substitution for those things, let's see if the Mishnah's analysis works out. Let's see if it's consistent. But today we're going to have we actually have a 180-degree argument about the factor in damages. On the one hand, I could say, what makes a person more obligated, more liable to pay for damage? I could say, since the person is more capable of controlling the damage, they're more liable. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, no, whatever is more damage is more liability. Whatever is a greater cause of damage is more liability for the owner. The other way is wherever the owner has more ability to stop the damage, they have more liability. Now we're gonna reject what I just said. But the opening thought is like this: the more I can control the damage, the more liable I am. The less I can control the damage, the less liable I am. We're gonna throw that out in a minute. Okay, but that's how the Gemara opens up. So the Gemara learns now when we're comparing. Remember, lo hare zeh in our context means, had I written A, I wouldn't have known B because B is more lenient than A. So if the Torah wrote A, since I would say, oh, A gets this liability because it's a stringent case, but had it not written B, I wouldn't know because it's less stringent. So now we're going to look at today and say, ironically, that the more likely the thing is to damage, it's going to come out the less liable the person is, ironically, because he's less able to control it. Let's take a look. So it says more. I'm sorry. So we're at the bottom of Gimel Amud Beis, the very bottom. We say what? V'achi kamar. Okay, this is what it says. Okay, you see where it says V'achi kamar? Second line from the bottom. So you say, oh, we want to say V'achi. This is what it said. Lo ra'aya Karen. Had he only written Karen, it's not as lenient. Okay, since the damager doesn't get any pleasure, the animal that maliciously damages is not like eating getting pleasure; it's just malicious. Karaya Shane, it's not as lenient as Shane. Where? Why? Where the damager, the animal is getting pleasure, and therefore what? Since this animal has a drive to eat, how can you control it? So you're less liable. You see what I'm saying? We're saying not having pleasure is more responsibility because you can easily control it, and having pleasure is less responsibility because you can't control it. Below Roya Shane, had you written eating, okay, and not written what goring, I wouldn't know goring Shane Kanawasalhazi. Why? Because since eating what doesn't have intention to damage, so what you're able, I would say, oh, there you're liable because you're able to control it. It's not as lenient as what? Had you not written the case of goring, I wouldn't know the goring is other because goring, it has intention to do damage, hard to control the thing. The thing's going crazy. Okay, but the Gemara says, get out of here. We don't learn that way. That's not what it is. The factor that makes a person obligated is the fact that what he owns is more likely to do damage. Until we get to absolutely beyond his control, the more likely the thing is to do damage, the greater liability the owner has. So we say, well, get out of here. What are you talking about? That's not true what you said. You want to tell me what? That had you written that eating, you wouldn't know goring is not liable? If eating where he doesn't have intention to do damage is obligated, it's less of a damager. Karen, well then goring where it's malicious and wants to do damage, it's got a head on, it's crazy. Okay, it's really what you need to tell me. Okay, now the Gemara says a very amazing thing. Yes, I'm going to prove to you the other way. You think that the more likely it is to do damage, the more liable you are? No, it's the other way. The more likely you are to do damage, the less liable you are because it's too hard to control. It's too, okay. So Akadaita Chamina says, no, I would have thought that way. Okay, I could have thought like you. Except that what? I could have here that what? That I would have thought me did I would think what? Listen, on the contrary, you see that intention to do damage is a reason to be what? Is a reason to be lenient, and that's why you have to write, goring. Even though you write eating, I say since goring has intention to do damage, I think it's more lenient. Okay, more lenient because you can't. We'll see because you can't because it's too hard to control. and therefore it has to tell me that goring is obligated. Me did the hobby. To what can I compare it? What's the rule? If a guy's a slave or a maidservant, when they do damage, he doesn't pay. If they get damage, you have to pay the owner. We learn later. It's a Mishnah. When they get damage, you have to pay the owner. When they damage, he doesn't pay. They go out and damage somebody else. He doesn't have to pay. Okay. Isn't it true by a slave or a maidservant? Even isn't it true that even though they intend to do damage, they're malicious? Even so, the owners are exempt. So you see, one, that the likelihood of damage, the more malicious the thing is, the less you're obligated. I think the same thing over here. Therefore, I would think, had you written eating, I wouldn't know that goring is liable because goring has intention to do damage. So the Torah has to write goring also. Ravashi says, get out of here. He says, get out of here. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. He says, you make a big mistake. The reason why a man is not obligated on damage done by his slave or by his maidservant is not because he can't control him. It's because we had to rabbinically say that to exempt him, goes otherwise they'll ruin him. What'll happen here? You just do a smart thing. The slaves want to get back to the master every day. They'll go out and damage somebody, and they'll have to pay for it. So we have to make an exempt to stop them. They get extorted. Why? Because we're afraid the master will make him angry. The guy will go out and light the standing sheaves of a grain of his friend. It charges his master, 100 mana every single day. They'll never get out of it. But really, the truth is that the more likely is to damage, the more obligated you are. The other way, we are forced to what? To unravel the problem this way. This is how you have to read the Mishnah according to Shmuel. Shor is goring, okay, and Mava is eating, okay, and Lo Roy Hakaren, it's not as lenient goring Shekabana Salahazik. Why? Because since it is very stringent, because it has intention to do damage, it's not as lenient. It doesn't have the leniency of eating. Where eating, the animal it's eating is not intended to do damage. So had you written goring, I would say what? You know why? And animal ate. If the Torah not written eating, I would say you're exempt from your animal eats. Why? Why? Because it never intended to do damage to you. You didn't have to guard it so much. Okay? L'roy Shane, on the other hand, I could say the opposite way. A Shane eating, had it only written eating, it's not as lenient. Since why? Since it is severe. Why? Because it has a reason to be obligated. Why? Because it gets pleasure. That's more likely to damage. You have to guard it. Where a Karen, it's not as lenient as goring. When animal gores, it's not getting any pleasure. So I would think, what? I don't have to worry about it because it's not driven so much to damage. However, it has the other way. Remember, each one has a reason that makes it more dangerous, more damaging. One because it has a drive to get pleasure. One has a drive to be malicious. Okay. But 1 second. Now, okay, we've solved the Mishnah. The Mishnah reads nicely according to Shmuel. So Shor is goring and Mava is eating. But I have a problem. 1 second. What happened to trampling? What is it? Peanut butter? Why we leave out a major category here? Okay. The answer is Shire. What happened? You just leave it out? Is it gone? You just forget about it? The answer is now. Be careful. This looks like a quote of our Mishnah. It's not. It's a quote of a Mishnah later on Daf Tesam Beis. Later on, there's an extra phrase in the Mishnah, Daf Tesam Beis. It says, it says when he does damage, the damager is liable. There by way of allusion, with an A. By way of allusion, it's saying what? By putting an extra phrase, it's alluding to the damage done by what? By trampling. You might say, what are you talking about? A major category of damage you're going to do by allusion, by poetry? He says, well, it's not bad. You should teach it explicitly. How do you leave such a thing out? So the Gemara says, you're right. Ella, what? Remember I told you Ella means what? You're right. I'm wrong. We're out. We got knocked out. So you have to explain. So that how do we explain if the Mishnah is Shane? Shmuel almost made it. We almost made it. The Maba is Shane, and we almost worked everything out. The only problem is it doesn't make any sense to say what that Shor is Karen is goring, and the Mishnah utterly left out the major category of what? Of trampling. So you have to say, don't worry. It's almost like we said. Ella, okay, you have to say Amar Rabba. Rabba says you have to say Shmuel means this. Tana Shor Laragli, you have to just change it a little bit. When it said Shor, the ox, it meant what? It's talking about trampling. Okay? Well, Maba Lishina, when it said Maba, it's talking about eating. So now we left something else out. Well, we leave out goring. Don't worry, this one we'll be able to solve. So now let's take a look. Okay. 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 Now we can read it easily. So where's the comparison? Remember, A is more stringent than B. So had you written A, I wouldn't know B. B is more stringent than A. Had you written B, I wouldn't know A. Let's work it out in the Mishnah. Okay. Lo roy haregel. Now the shore is not like Karen, not like Mava. Lo roy haregel. What trampling is not as lenient. Is not as lenient. Why? Why? Because it commonly damages. It's an ongoing damager. It's a normal. It's commonplace. It's a commonplace damager. Karoi Shane. It's not like eating Shane at Zekomatsu, which is not so common. It's very common for animals walk every single minute. It's an ongoing damager. It's ongoing. The eating, okay, animals sometimes eat other people's property, but it's not like every second. Animals walk, they're constantly banging into things, they're constantly doing something. But so that's one. So had you written what? Had you written trampling, I wouldn't know that you're liable, and not written eating, I wouldn't know you're liable for eating because it doesn't happen all the time. Below Roy, Ashena, and exactly the reverse. Had you only written eating is liable, since it has a stringency, what that it enjoys it, gets pleasure for what it's doing. It's not as it's not as lenient as rego, as trampling. What you know, the animal gets no pleasure of damaging while it's walking. It just happens. So therefore, I think that you're not obligated on trampling and had to write both. All right, so now everything's fine except I got one problem. What happened? Well, you still got a third category. You just left it out. I've been carrying mine. What'd you do? Well, again, what'd you do with goring? Was it peanut butter? Listen, he says, what do you do? He says, you just leave it out. Try what? You're just gonna leave it out? And the answer is this one. Now we're gonna answer the same answer, but it's gonna work. No, later on in the Mishnah, Daf Tesam Beis, when it has an extra phrase that says that when it does damage, that the damager is obligated, he has to pay Latui Karen. That is alluding to Karen. The same kasha before. 1 second. Let's not imagine how to leave out a major category. And you're going to learn it by poetry, by allusion? The answer is here, it's okay. Why? I'll tell you why. Don't worry. Because remember, and I'm going to elaborate on this in a minute, because our Mishnah, the Mishnah only wants to speak about things that are forewarned from the outset. Things that start after the first minute, they're liable full damages. They're forewarned from the first minute. Okay? But Tamanu, so far, the Mishnah doesn't want to specify what things that start out to be what? To be innocent, that pay half damages and only later become forewarned and have to pay. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit here. Don't worry, we're not late. We're not really. Not yet. Don't worry, we're not late yet. I don't think we're going to be late. But the story's like this. You have to remember that when the oral law is passed down orally, we need tremendous memory devices. Unbelievable. You have to have unbelievable things. Like I told you, only savants, only people who are basically abnormal can remember things out of context. Normal people, even very bright people, I told you, to memorize a phone book is very hard. To memorize a story is easy. Why? Why is it easy to memorize a story and hard to memorize a list? Because the story has a context. This thing, one thing follows another. There's a relationship, etc. You try to memorize the phone book or memorize a list of numbers. Usually, only abnormal people can do it. You understand what I'm saying? Why? Because there's no context to it. So in our vast oral law, we're passing down millions of pieces of data, millions of pieces of data. We have to have organization. You have to have organizations where the organization itself makes you remember. Oh, right. Now all the things in this category are like this. Missing one. There's one more like that. You know, we have to have ways of doing it. They didn't write anything down. Even later in Europe, even later in Europe, you're having a Talmud where you got to be rich to have a shas. To have a shas, if somebody copied down a shas, you got to be rich, very rich. They said to have a Talmud. People learn things by heart. Rashi, I was taught that Rashi wrote his commentaries on Masechtas that he never saw written. He wrote a commentary on Masechtas he never saw written down, and he knew even several different variants in the text. That's what I was taught. I can't prove it, but that's what I was taught. Now, and you should know, but later, even Europe, there were times you'd come to the base medrash, say, I want to study. They say, listen, do you want to come learn in these years? Say, yes, okay, look, we're studying Baba Kama. At the door, they'd say, tell us Baba Kama. You'd sit there and you'd say out Baba Kama, say, okay, come in, you got a book. And you can tell Baba Kama, you come study. You can't, what you got? You got no book? So you said, so we got a hard thing. So organization is critical to remembering all of these things. So now we said a big thing, don't worry. The Mishnah was constructed purposely that it only contains things that are what? That are muad from the outset. So that's a way of remembering. Remember, we're going to learn, we have many more, there are many more major categories than these four. So okay, so therefore, don't we? So now we've solved according to Shmuel. All right. Okay, now we're done. So now we have Shmuel's version of the Mishnah and Rav's version of the Mishnah. For Shmuel, Mava is Shane, and Shor is what? Shor is Regal, is trampling, and for Rav, Shor is all the categories of an animal damaging, and Mava is a man doing damage. So says the Gemara. Shmuel, my time why doesn't Shmuel say like Rav? It's reasonable. Rav also says reasonable. Amar Lachokis, he could say to you like this. He says, if you really think that our Mishnah, that Mava is a man doing damage, Okatani Sefer, we learn a Mishnah later. Later the Mishnah gives us, later the Mishnah on Daf Tesvav, it gives us a Mishnah of 5 things that are start innocent and 5 that are muad. And one of the things it talks about is that it says man. So man is on the list in a later Mishnah. So man's not on the list now, he said. Okay? Why he says Isak Adam. If you think our Mishnah said Adam in Maveh, Haktani Sefer, you learn later Mishnah Shor Muad. We're sure that that damaged that gored 3 times and was worn, and on the 4th time he has to pay full damages. We also learned, according to that opinion, that if an animal did the damage of Karen, of malicious damage, even in a private domain, he has to pay full damages. That's one opinion. Not everybody agrees with that, but that was the opinion later. That in that Mishnah, but Adam, and the Mishnah says later man. So how could man be in our Mishnah when the Mishnah continues and lists man only later on Daf Tezvav? Okay, right. So it says so that's why So 1 second, wait a second. But Shmuel, but according to you, okay, it said later of a listening ratio. How come it didn't say it originally? Be careful. Get ready. Look, we're looking at the category. Because our Mishnah is only speaking about damage done by property. It's not talking about damage done by a man's body. It's not that's done by a property and not by his body. These are ways of remembering. See, how did you remember the Mishnah? Because you had got it in your head. It's categorized. Oh, that's the one that talks about damage done by a man's property. That one adds damage done by a man's body. That one, that's how you remember things. That's saying you have to have a point of purchase that you can think of. Oh, that's that group. That's that group. That's how you remember things. And I'll tell you one now. If we're not late, listen to this. There's one hysterical. Sometimes you'll see the Gemara will ask something doesn't belong on the list. What do they say? They say kadinaspa. Oh, it's there for no reason. What is that? What kind of answer is that? You'll see. It's gonna happen. What's this one doing there? Oh, kadinaspa. It's there for no reason. Well, wait a minute. What kind of answer? No reason? Because I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you the answer, and you'll see it happens. You'll see that sometimes a workman will put something on his work belt that has nothing to do with the work belt. Why? Because there's no place to put it. And what happens is sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we get stuck with the data that doesn't really fit in any group. So what do? We purposely put it into a group where it doesn't belong. And listen to what happens. Okay, children, what's on this list? All the little ducks and the birds and the one that doesn't belong. That's how you remember it. All right, that's the one that doesn't belong. That's also you remembering it. You see what I'm saying? So kadinos, but sometimes, ironically, when we're stuck, we'll stick the thing in that doesn't, mamish, a sore thumb. And remember, and that sore thumb doesn't belong there. You see what I'm saying? That's the story. That's how you do it. So these are all memory devices. So here now we're saying what? Our Mishnah, you have to answer, according to Shmuel, is defined by damage done. What is a grouping of what? Of a person's property doing damage, as opposed to damage done by the human itself. He's also obligated to damage he does, but this is a different thing. We're not done yet. We're going to continue categories. Okay, now the Rav Nami. 1 second. Then how does Rav answer? Rav also is stuck with the fact that on Daf Tesvav the Mishnah lists man. How can he say now that the first Mishnah said man? It says it later. It's Haktani B'Sefer. Didn't it say man later on? Why is it saying it now? Well, Rav will answer you. Don't worry. It's there. Really, man was mentioned now. The official mention of damage done by a person's body is in the first Mishnah. It belongs there. Later on, it's repeated for a different reason. Since the Mishnah also wanted to remember the things that are pay full damage from the start, so it had to mention man from the start that he pays from the start. But no, that wasn't its official place. It was there to be part of a category. All right. Then 1 second. Now, according to Rav, how do we explain the Mishnah saying, "Oh, this is not as stringent as that"? Achikama, this is how it works. Lo roya shor. What? The ox, which is all 3 categories of damage by a living thing. This is hard to explain, but we're going to explain it. It says, He says the ox, which doesn't, the ox, okay, which pays the price of a man when it kills. When an ox kills a man, the owner of the ox has to what? Has to pay. When an ox kills a man, when an ox was warned and it killed a man, you have to pay what he has. He has to pay a penance. It's an argument whether he pays his value or the dead man's value. But it doesn't matter. It's not the point. He has to pay the value of a man. Okay, so you see that ox is so stringent that it pays the value of the man. Karoy Adam, it's not as lenient as a human being. Okay, when a human kills another human being by accident, he doesn't pay. When a human kills another human by accident, the truth is that even when a person pays a human or kills a human automatically, he doesn't pay. But that's not going to count. Why? Because the reason he doesn't pay is a different reason. Because we have a special rule. You know, we have a rule in the Torah. We do not kill a person and make him pay the money. If we're killing him, we leave him alone. That's called kam leib b'derab minei. We don't add insult to injury. We're going to kill the guy. So no, wait. First pay, and then we exempt him from the monetary payment. But when a person he killed by accident, okay, he also doesn't pay. He doesn't pay, and so here we see now. So what does it mean? So you can see had the Torah written. This is hard to do. Had the Torah written damage by an ox, the fact that you and I know after the fact that an ox has to that the owner pays a penance price, for the price of a man, that indicates that there's something more stringent, that there's more liability for a man's ox killing than for a man killing by accident. You're not going to get this someplace else. We're doing radical over here. You understand? Why is that? Because the person had no intention to kill. It was an accident. Okay, there's problems. You understand? But still, he had no intention. So in a certain respect, he's more liable for his ox killing a man. Okay, because he should have known that the ox has intention to kill, etc., etc. It's going to kill. Than himself killing a person by accident. He's more liable for the animal than for himself, according to that. So had you written so in a certain respect, even had I known that the ox was responsible, he was responsible for the ox doing it, we wouldn't know he was responsible for himself, for himself.
Doesn't a man who even pays by accident have to pay for
a man killing a man by accident? I'm talking about a man killing a man by accident.
What?
A man killing a man by accident.
Right.
Doesn't pay.
Nothing.
Well, really, he could pay with his life, and he was supposed to go to your mikvah.
Yeah.
If he doesn't
Yes.
get there in time,
Yes. And that's a good point. And clearly, Saley, the only thing is I'm saying, but we're talking just from monetary terms. He's more lenient monetarily.
His life is worth something too.
Huh?
His life is worth something.
Yes,
too.
it's true, but that's another problem. My one of my daughters, she's already grown. When she was little, so we lived in the old city. We lived in the old city, so there were tons of those years. There were tons of bombs, everything. So a lot of people they wouldn't send their children to the old city. The truth is, the old city was actually safer than the rest of the city, but in their minds, the old city was less safe. So my little daughter was really upset. My daughter Shipper, none of her girlfriends could visit her. She says, "Well, so what? So a few people got killed. So what? They can't visit?" She says, "Okay, got life. I just easy." Anyway, okay, good. So how do we learn it? So had you written what? The ox, I wouldn't know man. Well, Leroy Adam, and a man who was more stringent, Shechai Barbadwaim, you know that when a man damages a man, in addition to damages, he has to pay also 4 other things. He has to pay what? He has to pay for the doctor bills and for the being sitting idle and for embarrassment and for pain. He has to pay for all these things. Okay, so the man who has to pay 4 things, Karaya Shar, he's not as lenient as an ox doing damage. She'aimbo. So again, by the law, even though it sounds back to front, but by the law, we can understand that there's a way of thinking about it, that damage done by an ox is less severe than damage done by a man, as indicated by the fact you see the man has to pay for 4 extra things besides the damage, and an ox, and for his ox he only pays damage, he doesn't pay for the 4 things. So you see his liability is less when his animal does damage than when he does, and therefore, okay, now Asad Shabaham, and what's the end? At the end of the Mishnah, what we say that the common factor of all these things, Shadak and Lahazik, all the things in the Mishnah, according to everybody, it's their normal way to do damage. The Gemara says, "What's that? What are you talking about? The Chishor Dak Lahazik? What are you talking about? Since when? Since shore includes what? According to Rav, includes what? Includes Karen, includes goring. That's not normal. It's not the normal way. And normal animals don't gore. But that's why we only after 3 times do we say that it's a gore. Okay, the Gemara says, "Oh, but more, don't worry." No. When the Mishnah said that it's the way to damage, it's talking about an ox that gored after the fourth time, after the first three times. I am more darkly hazik. Get out of here. So, even an animal that's goring on the fourth time, is it? You want to say that's its nature? The answer is there's a big chiddush. Gemara says yes. Came the yid orchu. Once an animal has come to Beis Din three times and the man's been warned, we say that the nature of the animal has changed. Normal animals we don't expect them to gore anybody. Once an animal is gored three times, we say this animal has its nature is that it's a gore. That's what we say, and that person has to do it. Okay. Furthermore, what? I still have a kasha. According to Rav, he says what? He says, Adam Dakla Hazik. What are you thinking? How can you say if the Mishnah in summation says that it's their way to do damage? According to you, according to Shmuel, man is not in the Mishnah, but according to Rav, man is in the Mishnah. Are men is the normal way of men to do damage? It's unlikely that men do damage. It's a biyashim when he's sleeping. A man who's sleeping is absolutely likely to do damage. Ayashin Dakla Hazik. Come on, get out of here. Even a person who's sleeping, are they likely to do damage when they're sleeping? How many people damage every year? The answer is Kevin, the Kaif and Pashit. The answer is you're right. No, I'll tell you why. Because when people sleep, they contract their body and stretch out. Okay, orchihu, it's their way to do damage. Okay, it's normal for them to do that. They break things. Okay, now Ushmir Sanalecha. I have a problem. The language of the Mishnah in the end in summation says also their guarding is upon you. So there means that the damagers are something other than yourself. Look at the language. Their guarding is incumbent upon you. So therefore, there means it's not you. So he says, according to Rab, Adam Shmir Skuf Olav, how can you say their guarding is upon you about a man's own body? How can you say that? So the Gemara says, Gemara says, the time to come on. He says, come on, you know that we can answer that. Why? Tani Karna, we have a brisa where Karna taught the following. Arbos, Nezikin, he taught there are four major categories in Nezikin in the brisa. And Adam is one of them. And there also, he said in the end, he made a summation, he said, and their guarding is upon you. Here, Karna for sure used that phrase, their guarding is upon you, when he spoke about a man. Ella, what you want? So the same way that Rababo taught the teacher of the brisa to say, Tani other Shmir Skufalav. You have to say that even though we said their guarding is upon you, it really means when it comes to a man that his body is upon him, not them, but yours. Okay. Hanami here in the Mishnah also you have to say automatically, just fix it in your head. Adam Shmir Skufalav. A man's body is guarding upon. So even though summation says their guarding is upon you, even though it said man, it's understood that it means. And as far as the man, his body is upon him. When I was a kid in yeshiva. So we had a math teacher then before they opened up the Iron Curtain. So we had a guy, a Russian, a guy who escaped from Russia. He was a brilliant, genius mathematician. He was taught in all the big universities, etc. He loved to teach in the yeshiva. Why? And he told us why. He said, "Why do you love to teach in the yeshiva?" He was Jewish, but he wasn't, not an observant Jew, but a wonderful guy. Wonderful guy. So he was my genius's genius. So he loved to teach in the yeshiva. Why? Because every year he got a national champion. The yeshiva, he taught all the big places. Where did he get his national champion every year? In the yeshiva. He found one kid in the yeshiva and turned them into a national math champion every year. Anyway, so the famous story with him is like, how it happens in math class. The guy's got the whole blackboard full of, this equals this with the bottom of this is with an aleph and this, all these incredible, the whole blackboard from beginning to end is filled with a million symbols. And there's always one kid who goes, excuse me, Mr. Kowarski, isn't 3 and 1 4? And it says, so I make a mistake. These guys explain the whole universe. Like he made a little with me. He's like, okay, so I make a mistake. Here, the same thing in the Mishnah. You're right, and you correct it automatically. So what? We use the summation term there upon you. Obviously, his body, it's upon him. You have to spell it out. What are you being an idiot? You see what the Gemara is saying? Come on, use your head. But don't have to do that every single time. It's understood, and an intelligent person understands to make the correction. Okay, now we have one more challenge. We only had two opportunities. Mava, the strange word, we had Rav and we had Shmuel, and both of their explanations grammatically were difficult. If you remember, were grammatically difficult. But as far as textually, they were able to defend their position. Now the Gemara wants to propose, since the language Mava didn't really suit either of them that well, let's propose another candidate for what Mava is. It's really talking about a different thing. Maskif lover of Mari, let me say, why don't we say Mava is talking about water? Here, Damage done by water. The guy throws the water down. The guy gets dirty. Here, because why? Because the pasuk says, "Kikedoach eish hamasim." The same way the burning fire which melts things, mayim tiva eish, and the fire will cause the water to bubble. So tive mave is a language word of bubbling up. The water bubbles up, so maybe mave is water. No, okay, is water. Because it's talking about water that came in contact with fire. It's a bubbler. Where it says, get out of here. Come on. Mixi maim nivu. First of all, water is a plural word. Water is always waters in Hebrew. It's plural. So you know what I mean? It didn't say the water was bubbled in plural. It says tiva eish. It says what? See, it means the fire is causing to bubble. So the bubbling is not real. Ironically, the subject of bubbling is what? It's fire, not water. So you're wrong. It says, okay, but then 1 second. Okay, 1 second. But if you admit that now that the verb of mave, tive, of bubbling is on the fire, let's say, well, okay, then I got a better idea. Let's say mave is fire. Okay, maybe mave is eish. So why don't you say it's fire? Okay, the chik sieve tiva, when it says it causes to bubble, they shouldn't see. It's talking about the fire causes the water to bubble. But he says, nah. He says it's impossible. He says, look, the Mishnah has 4 categories: shor, bor, mave, and what? And hever, and fire. My mave, okay, hever. If you tell me that mave is fire, what's the last thing? Hever, fire. So it's you have shor, a pit, fire, and fire. What are you talking about? Okay, okay, Perish Kamafire, she'll say, don't worry. Number 4 is an explanation. Number 3, Mav is a funny word. It said Hever, then it's a fire. So it's Shor, Bor, Mave, which is Hever, which is fire. That's not going to work. Yachi says, Arba, that have the Mishnah say there's 4 categories. Shloshav, there's only 3. It doesn't work. When it says, V'chitema, Tana Shor, Dispeitarti. And if you want to say, look, okay, why don't we say that it's talking about an ox? It has 2 of them. Namely what? It's talking about it's talking about, for example, like we said before, like Shane and Regel. Ox contains both. It contains eating and trampling, and then you have bor is number 3, and Mavahever is number 4. Yochi says if that was true, the continuous is not going to make any sense. You said that Shor and Mava, which are alive, is fire alive? That's not true. That's not going to work. And furthermore, for 2, my kari eish, how can you say that mave and shor are not like eish? Mave is eish. I can say mave is not like eish. Mave is eish. So there you're out. We got you down at the 1 yard line there. Okay, now we're done. Now the next part is I'm going to do fairly quickly, and I'm going to let's make it easy like this. Remember, I told you all of our Mishnayos and Brises have the same job. They were the shorthand to ensure that we would pass down the oral law completely. They're lecture notes. You understand? The Mishnah is a lecture note, so you can tell the whole oral. You remember all the things you have to say in the oral law. A Bryce is also part of those lecture notes. There's a machlokas what Bryces are. I told you I usually explain that one opinion is that Bryces were leftovers. So remember the Mishnah was redacted from 600 orders down to 6. So Bryces were holdovers from the 600 that would make it as footnotes to make it easy to understand the very concise 6, okay, from the leftovers. That's one opinion. In any case, but they're always categorized in the way that you remember. So remember, I told you before there are many more major categories than these 4. We're going to look at 2 more categorizations and understand what characterizes those categorizations, so that we too can remember all of the chief categories. Okay, all the chief. Those what category? Each Mishnah Brisa is a category of categories. Okay, is a category of categories. One of the famous problems you probably know if you have a I'm not going to do it now. I'll do it to you another time. Okay, anyway, now get ready. Tani Rabbi Yoshua. So Rabbi Yoshua learned in a Brisa. He learned 13. He learned R4 plus another 9. Let's take a look. What's the 9 that he added that our Mishnah didn't? Shomer Chinam. If a person was an unpaid watchman and he was negligent in his watching, he'll be responsible for theft or loss. Vashoel, a person who borrowed, is also a type of watchman. A person who borrowed something and he's not he's not renting it, he's responsible for theft and for loss, even for accidental damage. Okay, no, say Sachar, another type of category of damages. No, say Sachar, a person who was paid to guard something is responsible for theft or loss. Okay, but he's exempt for accidents, but he still has to pay. Vasocher, a person who rents something is okay, has to pay for theft or for loss. Okay, so that's categories. Furthermore, here's another category: nezek. When a person hurts another person, he has to pay the devaluation. If he injures a person, he has to pay how much less that person is worth on the slave block. Tsar, a person who damaged another person has to pay for the pain that he caused them. He has to pay. How much would the person pay for an anesthetic, an operation not to get the pain? Repoi, a person who damaged another person has to pay for the doctor bills, for the medical bills. Sheves, a person who damaged another person has to pay for him sitting idle for the loss of salary and while he's getting better. Uboshes, he has to pay. He has to also pay for the embarrassment. Okay, so he added 9. Okay, Va'abada Masnisan, and the 4 of our Mishnah, 9 and 4 is 13. Hot Lesar, that's 13. So says the Gemara. The Gemara wants to do what I just said to you. Now the Gemara is going to make sense. The Gemara says, wait a second. So why? What was different? What categorization was Rav Oshia using as opposed to the categorization of Mishnah? Why did our Mishnah decide to focus on 4 and Rav Oshia decided to focus on 13? Okay, the answer is, so why didn't our Mishnah, our Tana, why didn't it mention these other 9? The answer is Bishlam al-Shmuel. Now, according to Shmuel, who said what? Who we already answered. We already had a categorization according to Shmuel. Remember, because he said that that Adam can't be in the Mishnah because our Mishnah is only talking about damage done by a man's property and not by his own body. So according to Shmuel, I can explain it easily. Our Mishnah is only talking about damage done by what? By a man's property. Rav Oshia is adding all these things that are damages that are done by a human. So it doesn't belong in the Mishnah. Those were 2 different formations. Rav, but according to Rav, who said man is included in our Mishnah, so we are including damage done by a human. Why did he bring all the things that Rav Oshia brought? The answer is listen. Okay, listening. Okay, pardon me. Rav listening. According to Rav, our Mishnah should have taught those things. It is teaching damage done by a man's body. The answer is no. Even so, there's still another differentiation. Tana Adam v'chol. Pardon me. No, I'm sorry. Simple answer. Tana Adam v'chol Adam. Don't worry. According to Rav, when it said man, our Mishnah didn't bother to differentiate between damage. Everything that a man does was included in the Mishnah. In other words, whether a man damaged property, a man damages everything that a man does. He didn't wash properly, did this, he did damage indirectly, directly. Everything he did is all included in the word Adam. So he doesn't have to teach these other 9.
We don't have it. We don't have it in our Mishnah.
We do according to Rav. According to Rav, Mave is Adam. Yeah.
These would then be told us.
What's that?
So all these things that are being listed as
no, we're actually saying these are all of us because they're all learned since remember Rashi's definition of an Av in Nizika is everything that's in the Pasuk. Every one of these things is learned from Psukim. So they are called of us. In this case, they're called of us. I think Gemara says 1 second. Rav Oshia, now we say even according to Rav Oshia, you said what he's teaching. Okay, 1 second. But then, if you tell me that Adam in the Mishnah, according to Rav, includes everything that a man does, so then why didn't Rav Oshia feel that he's superfluous? He doesn't need to teach a brisa because what? Because we already have Adam in the Mishnah. The answer is Trey Gavni Adam. No, because it's a difference to differentiate. We want to differentiate in categorization 2 types of damage done by man. Tadi Adam, Dazik Adam. Okay, no, the things that Rav Oshia is talking about. For example, when a man damages another man, that's when he has to pay for devaluation and pain, etc., etc. But Tana Adam Dazik Shor, they're talking about a man damaging property. That's in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about a man damaging property, and the Bryce of Roshi is adding what? Man damaging other humans. I says the Gemara, okay, if that's true, okay, if you're ready to differentiate between damaging a person or damaging property, and how come by an ox you didn't do that? How can you make a damage? I want to show you something. We demand consistency. Rav Yonasan Eibshitz was a very famous genius. He was a genius all the time. Rav Yonasan Eibshitz, and he was a child prodigy also. He was a genius. He was one of some people don't like that. He was a genius when he was a kid. So in Cheder, in Europe they used to learn like this. To teach Aleph Beis, they used to teach the whole alphabet with one vowel, and then the whole alphabet with another vowel. So you start with a vowel. Let's say Kamatz. So how you teach? You start Kamatz Aleph O, Kamatz Beis Ba, Kamatz Gimel Ga. You go through the alphabet. Then you teach Patach Aleph A, Patach Beis Ba. So they were learning Tzere, the vowel Tzere, A. So they're like, Tzere, da, da, da. So when they come to pay, they say Tzere, pay. So if this kid in the class lifts his arm and says, "Maybe I have a kasha." The guy says, you have a kasha on the olive base? He says, yeah, I have a kasha on the olive base. He says, what is he? He says, Rebbe, why is it Seirei pay? Also without it Seirei, it's still pay. Rebbe says, oh, good kasha. He walks over, he gives the kid a kiss on the head. He kisses him on his forehead, and he walks over, Yonas and Ipshus, the kid, he gives him a patch. Yonas says, why'd you patch me? He says, how come you didn't answer such a good kasha? So Yonasan's very upset that he got patched. He walks up to the kid who asked the kasha about pay, and he gives him a patch. So the kid said, why'd you give me a patch? He says, how come you didn't ask when we said hey? So now, the same thing says, if you give an answer, you don't get away with an answer. The answer has to now be consistent with everything else. If you told me that we want to differentiate between damage that a man does to property and damage does that a man does to man, then you see that you want to categorize damage to property and differentiate it from damage to humans. He says that what? He says, sure, Nami listen to sure, then hey, you're gonna do such a chacham over here. So then why don't you differentiate between an ox that damage? Why don't you have two types of ox? Listen, sure, dazik sure. Teach ox damaging an ox, listen, sure, that's another, and teach an ox damaging a man. Where it says, get out of here, hi, my. He says, what are you? So we said, what kind of comparison is that? One of them has meaning. In one case, the differentiation has meaning, and one it doesn't. Bishlam Adam dazik sure. It makes sense. What he says, that when a man damages an ox, it's really different than a man damaging a man. Why? Nezik because when a man damages an ox, all he pays is devaluation. Adam dazik Adam. When a man damages a man, Mishalim Arbitrum, he has to, in addition to damage, he has to pay 4 more things. So of course I should differentiate because the laws are different. The laws of a man damaging an ox are different than the laws of a man damaging a man. Elashar, Mali Shar dazik Shar, Mali Shar dazik. But an ox, there's no. What's the difference whether the ox damages an ox? Or the ox damages a man. In either case, all he pays is devaluation. So you don't make every differentiation just because you can. You make it because it has meaning. There's no meaning here. Hi, one second. 1 second. But you told me that the Brisa was only adding man damaging man, but you see that the Brisa also, all the cases of the watchman is really what is a man damaging property, right? He was neglected the property. Why is it there? But Kotani and it taught it. The answer is, don't worry. There's another reason because it's another categorization. Tani Hezeka the Biyadayim. We want to differentiate damage done directly. But Tani Hezeka the Memelim. We want to differentiate damage done indirectly. Damage done directly to property is in the that's in the Mishnah. And what? But we want the damage done directly when he damages a man's property. But Katani also has the damage that's done indirectly. That's the 4 watchmen. So you're right. Even though the 4 watchmen is damage done to property, but we want to differentiate damage done to property directly and differentiate from damage done to property indirectly by what? By not guarding it properly. When you don't guard something you're watching, you don't break it. You just neglect it, so it's indirect. Now, one more. Let's do one more quickly. We have Tani Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia made a super categorization. He had 24. So 24. he had much more. He added 20 to the Mishnah, and to the 13. What's 22, 13, and 24? He added what's 13, 24? 11. He has 11. Here, look, he added more. He taught these ones. Tashlume kefel, double payment. If a person steals something and is caught with it, he has to pay twice. The tashlume arba tfisha. If a person stole a sheep or a cow and he's caught with and he after he stole it, he shechted it or he sold it. When he's caught, then what? He has to pay. In addition, he has to pay 4 times the value of a sheep or 5 times the value of an ox. Veganav, or any person who stole something and instead of being caught, he admitted himself, so he only pays 1 time. Okay, why? Because it's a fine. He only pays once. Okay, he doesn't pay double. The Gazlan, a person who stole violently, okay, has to pay back what he stole. Paid him zomin. Witnesses who falsely accused the person of owing money, and they were really, they couldn't have never witnessed it. They have to pay. Vaones, a person who raped a basula who's a nara, a young girl, 12, and every basula, who has to pay 50 of silver. But mafata, the person who seduced the same category of girl, pays 50. Okay, motzi shemra, or a man a man who accused his wife of cheating between the kedushin and the consummation of the marriage, and it was false. He had lied. He said falsely, and the witnesses were Edim Zomim were false. He has to pay 100 and marry the girl. Amatame, a person who damaged a truma by making it tummy by putting a sheretz on it, a dead sheretz. But Dameya, a person who mixed up truma with non-truma, making it forbidden to eat. A manasech, a person who rinsed his hands in the wine for avodah zarah. That's the way they served it, and he made the wine forbidden. Okay, so all those damages, Vahani Fleisar, and the previous 13, I assume he made 24. I said, Rabbi Oshia, my time of Lataniani. How come Rabbi Oshia, who had an extended category, didn't learn all these things that Rabbi Chia learned? The answer is, but Kanas lo kamari, because he's not learning fines. Now, what are fines? A Kanas is like this. Memona, the simple explanation, mamon, a monetary payment means you pay tit for tat. What you took, you pay. Or you pay. Whenever you have a set price that's not commensurate with what you did, that's called a fine. Anything with a number has no measure. It's just like it's always this, it's always 30, it's always this. Fines that are not commensurate with what you did wrong are called fines. So since what he mentions fines, and Rabbi Oshia doesn't want to teach, he's not categorizing fines. He wants to memorize it differently. One second, I says, get out of here. But what do you mean? Not everything in Rav Chia was a fine. Ganav, a guy stole it and he admitted he pays once. That's not a fine. That's the price. The Gazlan, or anybody who stole violently, pays once. It's not a fine. The Mamonahu, that's regular monetary payment. Listening, those ones at least. So those ones are not fines. Why didn't Rabbi Yoshia teach them? Tani, he really did. He taught it. Why? Because when he said Shamachina Vashoel, not only is an unpaid watchman or a borrower obligated when they were negligent, they also could be considered a thief or a violent thief. Why is that? Because if they claim that the object was stolen or violently stolen, then they're caught, they themselves are considered what? That they stole it or they violently stolen. The shomer, the watchman who lied, is considered a thief, a ganav, or a gazlan, a violent thief. I don't know better English words for it. If you know better English words, I don't know what they are.
Punitive damages.
No, I meant for the ganav and gazlan. Yeah, I don't know better English words for it. I don't know what to say. Yeah, that's it. Okay, okay. You know what? It's actually a good point to stop here, and we'll continue tomorrow. Yeah, I know these are big pages. You got to just hold on. There's a lot of data on these pages. Thank you very much, Robus. Yeah. These are big pages.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in here.
This is for like non-from people. Do you have any classes for non-from people around?
At the moment, I don't have such a class, but I'll be happy to. I'm not sure if you want to have something you want to do. Tell me.
I have a friend here who lives in Oak Grove. He's not from. He just joined Rabbi Gibber. You know Rabbi Gibber?
I don't know Rabbi Gibber.
The Oka Torah Center.
Mm-hmm.
It's in back of Lox and Bagel.
Okay. Yeah, I know what Lox Bagel is. Anyway, if he wants to gather some people, you want to gather some people, I'm happy to do it. Let me know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's this you can't do these fast. They're just big pages. They're gigantic.
I understand.